Hello and welcome. You're watching the Daily Report for Friday, January 21st here in Korea. I'm Min San-hee. We address concerns over zoonotic diseases today amid recent news of hamsters infecting a pet shop worker in Hong Kong and more. Here first is a global COVID-19 update with our Kwon So-ah. So just start us off.
Sunny, we are starting the weekend, or we are entering the weekend with a concerning note with, again, more than 6,000 COVID-19 infections reported this Friday. That is 6,769 as of 12 a.m. and includes almost 6,500 domestic transmissions and close to 290 imported cases. Now, that is similar to yesterday in the 6,000s, but compared to last Friday, it is a jump by more than 2,200 cases from a week ago. And there's been a record high posted again in Gyeonggi-do province with 2,431 cases, followed by around 1,500 in the capital Seoul, and also quite a lot of places that are seeing triple digits across the country. And 21 more people have lost their lives in the past day, raising the death toll to 6,501. However, the number of patients that remain in serious or critical condition has been dropping again and stands in the 400s for the second consecutive day. Let's move over to the vaccination numbers. So we've got a little over 10,000 people who got their first COVID-19 vaccine shot a day ago, and close to 44,000 who got their second one, and the third one, or the booster shot. Now more than 277,000 people got that on Thursday, and that's 47.7% of the nation's population. Let's go over to the numbers abroad. There's been a rise by more than 3.7 million new infections that were posted in the span of a day as of noon Korea time, also with over 9,500 new fatalities. In the meantime, the U.S. has hit the 70 million mark in accumulated caseloads, and also there were more than 400,000 new cases in France again, and Germany posted a record high for a single-day caseload with more than 130,000 new infections. And those are the general updates that I have for now, but I'll see you back in a bit. Sunny?
Right, so thank you for the global tallies for now. Health pundits here in the country believe Omicron will dominate local infections in the days ahead. I have Kim Yeon-seung back in the studio with details on that. Yeon-seung, welcome back.
Thank you for having me, Sunny.
Right then, let's begin with the implications of an Omicron onslaught on our daily tallies.
Right, so it's not looking good ahead. In a month's time, numbers could spike to between 10,000 and 15,000 a day if the country fails to contain the virus soon. With Korea marking Seolnar, or Lunar New Year, just over a week from now, health authorities are bracing for a potential holiday surge fueled by large family gatherings and cross-country travel. Seolnar is also expected to be a busy time for businesses, but many of them will be missing out on key sale opportunities with all the COVID-19 curbs in place. The government has earmarked 14 trillion Korean won, or $11 billion to help business owners navigate through the rough waters ahead. This budget, which is waiting a floor vote on the National Assembly, includes cash handouts of $2,500 to each business owner.
Right. Yeon-seung, now throughout this week, you've been talking about Omicron-tailored strategy by the government, right? Tell us a bit about that.
Right. So with the anticipated Omicron surge ahead, health authorities need to find the right answers to these three pressing questions. These are namely how they're going to speed up testing, maximize treatment using limited medical resources, and prevent imported cases.
Right, and on this Friday, Yeon-seung, I understand authorities shared intentions to those ends, right?
Yes, exactly. So to ramp up testing, the government will make rapid antigen self-test kits available free of charge at COVID-19 screening centers. Let's take a listen to Prime Minister Kim Boo-kyum on the rationale behind this decision.
PCR tests will be for high-risk groups only, so that'll speed up the process. Standing in long lines in this cold weather to get tested will become less frequent.
The government is also mobilizing local clinics for testing and treatment. These changes will first be applied on a trial basis in regions that are witnessing an alarming spread of Omicron. These measures will then be adopted nationwide if they prove to be a success.
Right, Yeon-seung, which regions are we talking about here?
Right, so throughout the week, I've mentioned Gwangju City and Jeollanam-do Province have seen most of their cases as Omicron. So these areas will be included. Omicron is also spreading quickly in the southern region of Gyeonggi-do Province, so namely the cities of Pyeongtaek and Ansong. The new testing and treatment measures will also be rolled out in these areas as well.
Right, and moving forward, Janssen, what about border controls here in the country?
Health authorities are doing everything they can to strengthen border controls. On top of the PCR test that all arrivals have to go through, rapid antigen testing will also be required to minimize the possibility of imported cases leading to a community-level outbreak. Strict isolation rules will also apply. Quarantine exemptions will only be granted on a very limited basis.
I see. I hear authorities are also planning to expand the use of Paxlovid in the country.
Right, so Pfizer's oral treatment Paxlovid has been cleared for people aged 60 and over. Let's take a listen to Prime Minister Kim from this morning for more details.
We're bringing down the minimum age of drug administration from 65 to 60 and expanding its use in nursing homes, care hospitals, and infectious disease hospitals.
Up until Thursday, only 109 people had received the pill since rollouts began last Friday. This is far short of the government's initial goal of prescribing the pill to 1,000 people a day from their stock of 21,000 courses. So with this latest move, authorities are really trying to ramp up the use of these COVID-19 pills.
Right, Yansung, and what's the latest with regard to other alternatives, that is, for treatment here in the country?
Right, so health authorities are also expanding the use of remdesivir. Remdesivir is an antiviral medication, and on Friday, Korea's drug regulator approved the use of remdesivir on patients with mild to moderate symptoms of COVID-19 as well. This intravenous drug had been previously used to treat critically ill patients only, but health authorities are broadening the use to prevent mild cases to developing into severe illnesses. They felt confident enough to make this change after reviewing clinical trial data and also looking at the precedents set in Europe.
All right, Yansung, thank you for now, but do stay with us for the broader talks. Right, up next, we share with you the latest remarks by authorities here on the local COVID-19 situation, and I have Sua back at the desk.
Hi again, Sunny.
Right, so Sua, let's focus on the Omicron tailored response strategy of the government that Yansung mentioned. Under this new strategy being adopted in 4 regions, I understand, PCR testing priority will be given to those at high risk of infection. Tell us more.
That's correct, Sunny. So that will start on the 26th this month, which will be next Wednesday in Jeollanam-do Province, Gwangju, Pyeongtaek, and Ansong, as Yeon-seung mentioned before, which are places where the Omicron variant is said to be the dominant strain or in the process of becoming so. So people at high risk will be prioritized in getting tested using PCR tests. And as we are expecting Omicron infections to outnumber Delta cases in other places. So in other places, sooner than later, the system is expected to be implemented there as well, but with the government not giving a specific time frame. So what defines high risk? It's elderly people, people with existing health conditions, and those who are subject to contact tracing. And in the latter case, that will be decided by officials who are in charge of epidemiological research, meaning if you get a message from your public healthcare center to get a PCR test, then that makes you a person at high risk. So it's not up to the individual person to make a decision on when they need a PCR test or not, whenever they hear of someone nearby, for instance, who got infected. So regular citizens in the 4 locations named will have to stand in a separate line to test themselves with a rapid antigen test kit that will be available along with PCR screening. And here's more from an official who himself tried out the rapid test.
Under the watch of a screening center supervisor, you can receive your self-test kits and after testing negative, have your results verified and issued. All of that is free of charge at these locations. I'm holding in my hand right now a self-test kit I received several days ago. 1 line indicates a negative test result, and 2 lines indicate a positive result.
And if you do test positive with this antigen rapid test, then you can get the PCR test right away, and in that case, the PCR test will be free of charge as well.
Right. So can the negative result of a rapid antigen test serve as a substitute for a negative PCR test?
It can, Sunny. So people who are unvaccinated and have to go to any location where a vaccine pass system is being applied, they can now use this result from the self-test kit. But again, if they have been getting tested at such facilities where there are supervisors. So if they do use the self-test kit at home alone, that will not serve as a substitute for the negative test result. Meanwhile, there is also the possibility for people to get tested with the rapid antigen test at clinical facilities. In that case, they will have to pay around 5,000 won, or roughly a little over $4, but not for the test itself, but just for the diagnosis at those facilities.
Right, and amid the widespread use or planned widespread use of rapid antigen tests, what have authorities said about concerns regarding their accuracy?
Right, Sunny. There is a reason for why PCR tests have been more widely used, but this is how an official at the earlier government briefing explained the need and the efficiency of these self-test kits.
The spread of Omicron may lead to a higher number of suspected cases, making it difficult to conduct PCR tests on all patients, and potentially leading to delays in diagnosing high-risk patients like the elderly and those with underlying health conditions. Therefore, we'll be prioritising PCR testing for these vulnerable groups, with comparatively low-risk individuals being given rapid antigen tests which have an acceptable rate of false negatives.
So just to clarify one more time, the negative test result is more reliable than the positive test result, meaning the chance for you to have the virus when you test negative appears to be very low.
I see. Well, that is good to know. Right then, moving from testing back to treatment, Yunsung, how effective has Paxlovid been, and have we witnessed any notable side effects from patients who have received them?
Right, so many people are curious to know because it's a relatively new treatment introduced in the country. Doctors and nurses say that they've seen visible improvements in the patient's health conditions, and some patients even complained of a bitter aftertaste, which went away 3 to 4 hours later if they drank a lot of lukewarm water. Some of the reported side effects so far seemed mild and included diarrhea.
Right, Yunsung, but we are expecting more people to receive Paxlovid.
Yes, exactly. Paxlovid pills will be sent to our troops deployed overseas. Now, these pills will be sent to Korean military units deployed in the United Arab Emirates, South Sudan, and Lebanon, which have all reported COVID-19 outbreaks on base. With more people being treated with Paxlovid in the coming days, hopefully, we'll be hearing some positive news on their effects.
Meanwhile, so there is some development, I understand, in Korea's production and export of COVID-19 treatments. Tell us about that.
Right, Sunny. So Korean pharmaceutical companies have been given the green light by the government to manufacture a copy version of Merck's COVID-19 antiviral treatment, Molnupiravir. So Hanmi Pharmaceutical, Celltrion, and Dongbang FTL will be among those who will produce these pills under the name Lagervio. Hanmi will produce both the drug substances and the finished product, Celltrion the finished product, and Dongbang FTL the drug substances. These pills, however, won't be used domestically as they are expected to be supplied to 105 low and middle income countries. This latest decision comes as the Medicines Patent Pool, a non-profit organization under the United Nations, has designated 27 drug makers to make and supply Lagervrio in a bid to help global access to oral COVID-19 pills. And we know that there has been a lot of demand for instance, Pfizer's Paxlovid pill around the world. So I guess this is an alternative to get more people around the world provided with these antiviral pills.
Right. All right. So as always, thank you very much for that report. Yunsung, thank you. I'll see you back on Monday. Topping our headlines at this hour, neighboring China and Russia have derailed Washington's push for UN sanctions on 5 North Koreans for their alleged roles in advancing Pyongyang's missile activities. Our Kim Hyo-sun has more.
China and Russia on Thursday blocked America's bid to impose new sanctions on North Korea in response to regime's latest missile launches. The move came ahead of a closed-door UN Security Council meeting on North Korea, the second in just 2 weeks. Following the launches over the past few weeks, Washington imposed unilateral sanctions against North Korean individuals and entities. It then proposed 5 of those individuals also be subject to UN sanctions. While the request had to be agreed to by all 15 members of the Security Council, Beijing and Moscow placed a hold on the proposal, leaving it in limbo. China reportedly said it needs more time to look through the proposal, while Russia said more evidence is needed to back the U.S. request. The U.S. ambassador to the UN on Thursday stressed the need for the Security Council to respond to the regime's launches.
We also call on member states to implement Security Council resolutions to which the Security Council unanimously agreed, and which calls on the DPRK to abandon its weapons of mass destruction and ballistic missile programs in a complete, verifiable, and irreversible manner. It is extremely important that member states take the necessary steps to implement the sanctions in their jurisdictions or risk providing a blank check for the DPRK regime to advance a weapons program.
Linda Thomas-Greenfield then reiterated Washington's desire to hold talks with the regime, saying it's willing and prepared to talk at any time. Kim Hye-san, Arirang News.
Over in Cairo, President Moon Jae-in and his Egyptian counterpart have agreed to boost bilateral ties on both the defense and economic fronts. Our Blue House correspondent Kim Min-ji reports.
South Korea and Egypt are in negotiations to export Seoul's K9 Thunder self-propelled howitzers to Cairo. Following a summit with Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi on Thursday, President Moon Jae-in said the two sides are working toward a final conclusion. Eyes are on whether a deal could be reached before Moon wraps up his 3-day visit on Friday.
우리 두 정상은 지금 논의되고 있는 K9 자주포 계약이 양국 간 상호 신뢰에 기반한 방산 협력의 성과로서 K9 자주포가 이집트군 전력 정강에 크게 기여함과 동시에 기술 협력, 현지 생산을 통한 한 이집트 간 상생 협력의 대표적 성공 사례가 될 것이라는데 의견을 같이 하고.
The leaders also agreed to a joint feasibility study for a bilateral free trade deal to expand their scope of cooperation in future-oriented and sustainable areas based on their comprehensive cooperative partnership. If signed, it would be South Korea's first FTA with an African nation.
광범위한 FTA 네트워크와 젊은 인구 구조, 풍부한 자원까지 갖춰 발전 가능성이 무궁무진합니다.
South Korea also pledged $1 billion through the Economic Development Cooperation Fund, which provides low-interest loans. It'll be used to fund various projects like expanding Egypt's transport infrastructure. The two sides inked MOUs under which South Korea will join the modernization project of Egypt's Luxor High Dam Railway, while another calls for cooperation in the eco-friendly mobility sector.
한국의 개발 경험을 나누고 이집트의 교통, 수자원, 인프라 확충에 힘을 보탤 것입니다.
To mark his visit, President Moon also gave a written interview with one of Egypt's daily newspapers, Al Ahram. He said he was optimistic about working with Egypt to increase mutual benefits, saying Seoul and Cairo are entry hubs into the Asian and African markets, respectively. President Moon also called for support from Egypt for the Korean Peninsula peace process. Looking at the current situation, President Moon said it won't be easy, as the road to peace hasn't been institutionalized yet. However, he vowed sincere efforts right until the end of his term in May. President Moon's visit to Egypt is the first by a South Korean leader in 16 years. It's the final leg of his week-long tour that also took him to Saudi Arabia and the UAE.
President Moon says Egypt's future is bright, hoping that Seoul can be by Cairo's side to open a new chapter for bilateral cooperation. He also expressed hope that the two countries can take their relations to another level when they mark 30 years of diplomatic relations in 2025. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News, Cairo.
On the cultural front, Metaverse is adding a fresh dimension to Kpop with the emergence of virtual and AI stars. Our Kim Bo-kyung has details.
Auditions for idol groups no longer just take place in the real world. People are choosing the next trending celebrities in the virtual world by watching a series of talented virtual avatars played by online broadcast streamers. One of the hottest virtual idol groups is 이세계 Idol, a 6-member girl group that debuted last December after passing auditions held by a well-known Twitch streamer.
국내 최초 버추얼 아이돌 오디션 이세계 아이돌 프로젝트 오늘 오디션 그 첫날
이세계 Idol debuted with the song Rewind, and they are mesmerizing fans, already almost hitting 3 million views for their official YouTube music video. The streamer behind the project says their next song could be released by the end of February. And they aren't the first virtual K-pop stars. Riot Games, the studio best known for League of Legends, used the opening ceremony of the game's 2018 World Championship final to unveil virtual K-pop group KDA. The video for the 4-member group's debut song Pop Stars has been viewed almost 500 million times. An insider says people who are not game players have also become fans of the group, and as the reason behind such success is nothing but the essentials.
We believe the neat song itself was the main reason. We benchmarked K-pop songs, catching K-pop lovers' attention. Unique storytelling, too, has played a big part. League of Legends has around 150 characters with their own universe and characteristics, along with storytelling. KDA Group, too, has stories for each of the 4 members.
The new trend has gone even further with the creation of an AI idol group. AI graphic company Pulse9 brought life to Eternity, an 11-piece girl group made from hyper-realistic virtual characters. The girls were chosen from the faces of 101 girls online by internet users and were brought to life using artificial intelligence. Culture critics say Generation Z especially has a strong tendency to just enjoy virtual reality no matter whether it is real or not. As the virtual world becomes the new normal, eyes are on whether it will become the mainstream in the entertainment industry. 김보경, Arirang News.
Let's take a look at what's going on in the world now. At least 29 people, including 11 children and 8 pregnant women, are dead in Liberia after a deadly stampede at a Christian ceremony in the capital Monrovia on Wednesday night. The stampede occurred when a gang armed with knives began attacking some of the hundreds attending the event. According to a police spokesman, the death toll is expected to rise as a number of people are in critical condition. One person linked to the attack has been arrested. Former Pope Benedict XVI is accused of failing to take action against clerics in 4 cases of alleged sex abuse in his archdiocese when he was the Archbishop of Munich. According to a report released Thursday, there were at least 497 victims of abuse, mainly young males from 1945 to 2019. A Munich law firm, which has been investigating the allegations, noted that many other cases had probably not been reported, while the former pope had ignored the abuses.
In all cases, Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI strictly rejects any misconduct on his part. Essentially, he claims a lack of knowledge of the facts and a lack of relevance under canon law. In doing so, he continues to claim ignorance even when, in our opinion, it is difficult to reconcile this with the facts of the case.
The latest report comes as Germany's Catholic Church in 2018 apologized to victims after a report found that clerics had abused around 3,700 victims in a span of 7 decades. Last year, another report against the Archdiocese of Cologne between 1975 and 2018 found 202 cases of abuse and 314 victims. Regarding the latest investigation, the Vatican, without mentioning the former pope, said it would evaluate the full report and examine its details. At the young age of 19, British-Belgian teenager Zara Rutherford becomes the youngest woman to fly solo around the world on Thursday, and the first person to do so in a microlight plane. The trip, which took 5 months through 5 continents, saw her fly some 51,000 kilometers before landing in Belgium. And after months of flying, Rutherford was just happy to complete the journey.
It's just really crazy. I haven't quite processed it, I think. I mean, coming here, I was basically in tears, just trying to imagine what it'd be like to finally be home after 5 months. And even this flight wasn't easy, so I'm just super happy.
The teen received her pilot's license in 2020 after training with her father since she was 14. She now dreams of becoming an astronaut, but most importantly, hopes her voyage will encourage more women in science, technology, and aviation. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
It's that time of the week again when we shed light on issues making headlines in one particular country through the words of pundits there. Today we turn to neighbouring Japan and I have Walter Sim live on the line. Walter, hello again.
Hi.
Right, Walter.
Thanks for having me.
You're most welcome. Now, about a month ago, Japan's daily COVID-19 tally was hovering on the double digits. Back on Thursday this week, I believe Japan recorded close to 40,000 infections. How are authorities explaining the frightening rebound there?
Well, experts are pointing to the sheer transmissibility of the Omicron variant as the main reason behind the surge, especially by those who have no symptoms and thus do not know that they are even carriers of the virus. There are also lessons, I think, to be learned from Japan's ongoing spike, despite having imposed one of the world's strictest border controls against COVID-19. The earliest flare-ups for Omicron appeared to have occurred last month at US military bases across Japan, where returning US servicemen did not do basic COVID-19 protocol like PCR testing or even wear masks outside camp. They then interacted with locals and thus seeded the presence of Omicron in the country. And the fact that all this had happened around the year-end festive season, which was also the peak travel period for Japan, could have catalyzed the spread of the virus further, faster and wider.
Right. Walter, now in response to the latest resurgence, tough, very stern COVID-19 prevention measures have been reinstated in quite a number of regions. Could you tell us more about that?
Yes, you're right in pointing that out. A quasi-emergency is now in effect in 16 out of Japan's 47 prefectures, including in Tokyo, where the measure begins today. And this is in relation to how, the spike of the virus cases across the country. And it is likely that more prefectures would come under this quasi-emergency measure from next week, including in the Kansai region, because Osaka, Kyoto, and Hyogo governors are saying that they would request for the national government to put these areas into this quasi-emergency going forward. One point I think that is worth noting is that Japan has been relying very heavily on requests rather than legal punishment throughout this pandemic. And what this means is that there are no fines on businesses that do not comply with government requests, for instance, to close early. And so it's actually not uncommon that, some businesses choose to forfeit the support grants they would otherwise receive for compliance if they do think that it's more lucrative to stay open. Even then, this so-called quasi-emergency that's now in effect is not as strict as the measures that were taken last year. So, for instance, F&B businesses can now stay open until 9 p.m. With alcohol service until 8 p.m. But last year, they could only stay open until 8 p.m. and could not serve alcohol at all. So I think there is a lot of give and take in the government's response towards COVID-19, especially since, the government understands that there is a fair bit of fatigue and unhappiness, especially amongst business owners, towards prolonged measures.
Right, of course, feelings of fatigue and frustration are universal here. With regard to containment efforts there in Japan, Walter, what can you tell us about COVID-19 inoculation efforts as well as the country's vaccine pass system?
Well, inoculations are proceeding at not as quick as a pace as many people would like, I think. So as of Thursday, 78.7% of the population has been vaccinated twice, and that figure has kind of stagnated in recent months after inoculation efforts had rapidly accelerated over the summer months last year. Just 1.4% of the population has received a booster dose. Prime Minister Kishida knows that this is a problem and has vowed to speed up efforts so that more people can receive their third shots as soon as possible. As for the vaccine pass policy, well, there is this vaccine certificate that unfortunately is not as widely used as I think the government hopes. So in one instance where this vaccine pass comes into play is in F&B businesses that theoretically have to check that when they accept groups of 5 people and above, they have to check that the diners are vaccinated. But I don't think a lot of businesses actually put this into practice. So a rollout has been pretty much uneven, and much of this vaccine pass policy is actually seen as necessary for international travel rather than domestic use.
Right, I see. Walter, you mentioned Prime Minister Fumio Kishida. I understand his approval rating within members of the public is rising. Could you tell us a bit about that as well?
Yes, that's quite interesting, I think, and that actually caught quite a number of political watchers by surprise. So I think one theory behind why Kishida's approval is improving despite the soaring COVID-19 figures mainly stems from how he is willing to more constantly communicate with the public. He is giving a lot more time to reporters than his predecessor Yoshihide Suga ever did. And this kind of helps create this personable image with the public that he is more down to earth and more willing to explain his policies. He would also have won points for his economic promises to the public to, boost wages, to create a more equal economy, though how exactly he would do so and the eventual impact on businesses and their profit lines, their bottom line still remains unclear. But one thing that is for sure is that Prime Minister Kishida faces a very delicate balancing act, especially since his Liberal Democratic Party has to preserve its majority in the upper house in an election in July. So I think one of his key priorities is that he would not want to appear to be rushing into, prioritizing the economy over public health concerns, especially since that still does not appear to be sufficient evidence about how bad or how virulent Omicron might be. So media surveys actually interestingly show that, a majority of the public think that COVID-19 measures, some form of emergency or quasi-emergency is necessary. And I think this could have helped boost his approval ratings as well. The fact that he appears to be listening to the public and appears to recognize the fact that, some form of restrictions are necessary.
Right, and speaking about that is staying with Prime Minister Fumio Kishida's agenda. I understand he has virtual talks planned with US President Joe Biden for later on this Friday. Could you tell us a bit about that as well, Walter?
Right. It's quite unfortunate, I think, from Prime Minister Kishida's point of view. He wanted it to be a face-to-face summit with President Joe Biden, and that had actually been in the works before Omicron variant threw everything into disarray. But with regards to tonight's summit talks, well, China is definitely a perennial topic, but North Korea is also likely to be a key item on the agenda given Pyongyang's spate of missile launches this month. The two leaders might also discuss Russia and its advancement in Ukraine. But beyond diplomatic and foreign policy issues, I think the economy is also likely to be a key focus for both countries. Media reports here have said that Japan and US will launch ministerial talks on economic and climate issues. And I think both countries are looking to cooperate even closer on these fronts going forward, especially given China's growing might. Media reports here also say that Kishida might try to convince Biden into rejoining the TPP, especially since China has applied to join the trade pact. Kishida thinks that the US absence in this international trade pact sends the world a wrong message about the US commitment to the international trading order, and so that could also be something to expect.
Right, I see. All right, Walter, thank you for the latest from neighbouring Japan, and do take care.
Thank you.
Authorities in Hong Kong believe hamsters at a pet shop infected a worker there with the Delta variant of COVID-19. Now, in recent years, there has been quite a bit of media coverage of zoonotic diseases. And for more on this matter, I have Dr. Kim Seung-taek from Institute Pasteur Korea. Dr. Kim, welcome back.
Good afternoon.
I also have Dr. Keith Hamilton at the World Organization for Animal Health Live on the line. It's a pleasure to have you with us, Dr. Hamilton.
Good afternoon, Sunny. Thank you.
Right, Dr. Kim, we'll start here. Let's begin then with a few words on the possible route of Delta transmission from hamsters to the pet shop worker.
Well, according to the reports from Hong Kong, that actually there had been no the cases of Delta infection for the last 3 months. So then they were just very keenly just interested in this case. And the report said the employee of this pet shop was infected, and then the potential route of transmission is from the hamsters. And then for the transmission, although the COVID-19 is an airborne disease, but we do not know about exactly how the transmission occurs among the animals. Sometimes by depending on maybe can be actually the respiratory route. Sometimes can be actually transmitted by just the contact. But anyway, I mean the government actually trace back to the transmission route from the hamster to the human, and then these hamsters seem to be imported from the countries in some countries from the Europe right now.
Right. And Dr. Hamilton, how does your entity perceive the risk of COVID-19 transmission from animals to human beings?
Right. Well, first I'd like to say that a broad range of animal species appear to be susceptible to COVID-19 virus infection. But most infections in the field have certainly happened from contact with humans. So most infections have been from humans to animals rather than the other way around. There isn't much evidence of infection of humans by the animals themselves, but this is a potential risk. The two things we would be concerned about in terms of public health risk in relation to animal infections is for animals to become a reservoir of COVID-19 virus that might spill back into humans. And the other risk is for the virus to be introduced to animals and then for it to evolve in animals, leading to the emergence of more variants. But really, with events like this, there needs to be a thorough investigation to understand how the animals were originally infected, because, as I said, usually they're infected by humans that are infected with COVID-19, but there is potential then for some animals to pass infection to other animals that they're in close contact with. And we do know that hamsters are susceptible and that they can pass infection to other hamsters from laboratory experiments.
Right, I see. Dr. Kim, so there have been cases, like Dr. Hamilton has said, of people infecting their pets with COVID-19. Having said that, what is the risk, in your opinion, of a reversal in that trend?
Well, this transmission route is maybe this is a rare phenomenon, or just a matter of just a rare detection or the rare report. So we do not know for sure how frequently it does occur. And then, as Dr. the Hamilton said, there's a chance of the viruses once infected some other animals, and then they can potential to evolve to another different kinds of the variants. And then we cannot rule out any other outcome, but sometimes it may be virulent. I mean, in terms of the human point of view, but also there's some potential to that these viruses can be very attenuated. Because what I mean attenuation is the virus is kind of adapt themselves in the new host, like this SARS-CoV-2 actually somehow adapted themselves within the humans. So then this is actually attenuation is one of the method in the past that generating attenuated vaccines with these viruses.
Oh, I see. And Dr. Hamilton, what can you share with us about the impact of COVID-19 on animals thus far, since we enter year 3 under the pandemic?
Right, so our member countries report occurrences of COVID-19 in animals to our organisation. So we're a unique source of information on animal infections. I think 35 countries have reported events in animals to us, and that spans 18 species. So we know that in the field setting, 18 different species of animal have been infected with COVID-19. And as I stressed, this has usually been through close contact with humans. And those animal species vary from tigers to snow leopards to gorilla to mink to white-tailed deer and even a hippopotamus. The two kind of quite significant events that we've had reported to us are infections of mink on mink farms. And that was significant because mink are very, very susceptible to the virus. So when they were infected in the farm setting, infection spread very rapidly between mink. Also on these mink farms, we saw that there was potential for the virus to mutate. So there was potential for the virus to evolve and produce more variants. So that was a concern, and countries took action to control the disease on mink farms. Another very interesting event recently was in North America. A fairly high prevalence of white-tailed deer were found to be infected with the SARS-CoV-2 virus. Thankfully, those white-tailed deer didn't seem to be affected severely by the disease, and there wasn't really any evidence of mutation of the virus in white-tailed deer. But really, we don't fully understand the implications of COVID-19 virus infections in animals yet. But what we're encouraging our countries to do is to continue to monitor animal populations, to gather information so we can better assess the risks and make decisions later on. And we'll be providing guidance to our countries on how they can best target monitoring and surveillance in different animal species.
Right, which is probably the most logical approach we have at the moment then. Dr. Kim, COVID-19 has been classified as a zoonotic disease believed to have originated from bats. Now, granted, there are some pundits who claim that conclusion is premature. But how does the persistence of COVID-19 transmission within animals perhaps look to affect our own efforts to eliminate COVID-19?
That's right, and actually that's why from the earlier in the pandemic, the experts said that this COVID-19, that is SARS-CoV-2, will not be just eradicated. It will be with us probably just forever. And one of the reasons is that this virus has now just an animal reservoir, and then now just the hamsters and the minks and any other so many animals can be infected, and then within these animals the virus can just replicate. So even after, well, theoretically we can just eradicate this virus from just a human society, the viruses will just remain in the animal reservoir. So then there is some potential to just the virus can just transmit from the animals to humans. So this is kind of just a limitation of this kind of genetic viruses. But in contrast, some viruses actually just eradicated, can be eradicated. For example, like smallpox viruses, after some hundreds of years of vaccination effort, this virus was eradicated, and except for 2 laboratories in Moscow, in Russia, and then the US, just in case in the laboratory. And then now the WHO is projecting some elimination of some polio virus, and also maybe within 10 years or so, there's a hepatitis C virus. One of the common thing among these viruses which can be actually eradicated is that it's mostly like human viruses. That there's no known just report in any animal reservoir for these viruses. But if there's any animal reservoir, it's really tough to just eliminate this virus on the planet.
Right. And Dr. Kim, COVID-19 has served to raise universal awareness perhaps about the danger of zoonotic diseases. What perhaps are some other examples of such diseases, with the exception of the plague perhaps?
Well, there are actually just so many genetic viruses, and then approximately 60% of human infections and infections actually just accounted by the genetic infections. And then some of the examples, and then if I just recall it, there are MERS and then SARS, like just the SARS-CoV-2, or just the genetic viruses, and then severe fever with the thrombocytopenia syndrome. This is probably just very popular in Korea. It's like a seasonal viral infection. This is also a genetic infection. This is actually the transmission mediated by just a tick biting. And then there are others like a Zika virus infection, and also Ebola, and some rabies virus infection, and the West Nile virus infection. All those are some genetic viruses, and then the transmission is very diverse. Some of them is actually respiratory infection, and then some infections actually just transmit by the vector, mostly some mosquitoes, and then just the ticks, and then sometimes just some others, some contact, just a transmission.
Right. And Dr. Hamilton, keeping in mind what Dr. Kim has said, how do you explain the recent rise, perhaps, in zoonotic diseases?
Right, we certainly need to develop a better understanding of the drivers for disease emergence, but we do kind of recognize, and we certainly acknowledge that the likely drivers of disease emergence are deforestation, climate change, land use change, certain types of agricultural practice, illegal wildlife trade. These are generally accepted to be the drivers of disease emergence. I think it's important to note that animals and wildlife are also victims of emerging infections, and it's important not that we shouldn't blame animals. Animals are also victims of emerging disease, and the drivers of disease emergence are largely linked to human activity. So when we better understand those drivers, we might be able to take steps to reduce the risk. Certainly we can start because we have a broad understanding, so that we do know some of the things that we can do to reduce the risk of disease emergence.
Right, so largely speaking, human beings are to blame for this reality then?
Well, human activity.
Right.
It's a complex interaction of human, animal and environmental factors. That's why we talk about One Health.
Right, of course. Dr. Hamilton, quite recently, relevant authorities in the UK confirmed a case of avian influenza in a person there. Now, bird-to-human transmission of avian flu is said to be rare, I understand. What can you tell us about this recent case?
Well, you're right. Such events do occur, but they are very rare. And from what I understand, this person was infected in very close, regular contact with a large number of infected birds which were kept in and around their home. And we know that almost all cases of H5N1 infection in people have been associated with close contact with infected live or dead birds or a contaminated environment. We have about 20 years of data of H5N1 events in humans, so we can look back and look at these past cases as well.
And Dr. Kim, what can you share with us about the potential transmission of avian influenza from perhaps one infected individual to another human being, and how fatal is this disease for us?
Well, based on the some prior just a report about this transmission of the some bird flu, its case fatality sometimes can be up to like 60%. So it's quite just fatal. But then many experts are actually concerned about the potentially later some human-to-human transmission. But as Dr. Hamilton said, this has not been very just well, it seems to be pretty just a rare event so far.
Right, I see. Dr. Hamilton, I believe your entity has raised the alarm on the growing risk of avian influenza among people then. Could you perhaps explain this stance by the World Organization for Animal Health?
Of course. So first, it's important to say that this is a disease of birds. That's why it's called avian influenza, avian being birds. So infections in birds are relatively common, but infections in humans, as we've said, are rare and sporadic. But in birds, it can have a devastating impact. Some strains known as highly pathogenic avian influenza strains cause very, very severe disease, which can kill entire flocks of birds. So this causes devastating losses for the farming sector. This year, we've seen unprecedented number of outbreaks of avian influenza in birds, which is hitting the poultry industry very hard in many countries. We're also seeing that avian influenza is having a significant impact on wild bird populations, and this could be a real threat to endangered species. This year, we're not sure why we're seeing this unusual situation this year. It really is unprecedented. And again, it's likely to be due to that complex interaction between environmental factors, viral factors, and bird population dynamics of birds. But it could well be linked to some environmental changes which are affecting the habitats of wild birds or their migratory patterns. So that's something that we need to further investigate.
Right. And Dr. Kim, staying with what Dr. Hamilton has said, how do you explain the emergence of zoonotic diseases in recent years, and what are the implications of this phenomenon on efforts to perhaps ensure public health?
Well, Dr. Hamilton actually mentioned about this in this a moment ago, and then I want just to re-emphasize that well, just the growing just the global population and then just the climate change somehow just well intensifying the human activity, and then this human activity is actually just destroying some wildlife just reservoir, and the main just activity is probably including some deforestation and then some urbanization and then building cities and then roads, and then this kind this activity somehow now just increasing chances of human between the human and then some other genetic unknown pathogens. So this pathogen was somehow existed in some other animal reservoirs, maybe some in some very deep forest. But now the people are developing and then deforesting, and then there are more chances of contacting between humans and then animals. That's the main reason. And then also now we have air travel. Sometimes one epidemic outbreak that actually disease can easily transmit it to someone in some other total different continent, whether it is a respiratory disease or contact transmission and others. Yeah.
Right. Dr. Hamilton, do you suppose our efforts to ensure a green world then perhaps will serve to prevent future pandemics?
Well, yes, and I think that's the idea of One Health, really. Like One Health in a nutshell is about multi-sectoral cooperation towards the common goals of protecting human health, animal health, and the environment. So I think over the years we've learned that there are no simple siloed solutions to things. We really need to work across sectors and develop holistic solutions. And I think this kind of adoption of systems-based thinking, where we think about things as complex systems rather than very rational siloed systems, it is going to help us enormously in our future efforts to maintain the health of humans, animals, and the environment.
Right. All right, Dr. Hamilton, thank you very much for your insight today. Dr. Kim here in the studio, thank you for your thoughts and your time. Right, well, that ends our editions of the Daily Report for this week. We'll be back with fresh coverage on Monday. See you then. Thank you for now.